Good morning. Boy, it got real quiet real quickly. That's really scary. You're not here to talk tonight. I'm Charles Dorn. I'm the current chair of Eric's Club. I want to welcome everybody. I think that a little bit about Eric's Club just to begin. For those of you that don't know, Eric's Club was established in 1999 by emeritus board member Dr. Clinton Rapole, who was with us today. And I know that our speaker has a few things to say about Dr. Rapolo because he was his TA. So Mike is going to have a couple of choice comments to make later about Dr. Rapolo. Dr. Rapolo is the former Eric Hilton Distinguished Chair and Professor Emeritus of the college. For those of you that don't know, Eric's Club members must have graduated from our college in either the undergraduate, graduate, or PhD program and have been out of their program for 20 years. Eric's Club members have held significant positions in the hospitality industry and other allied fields at an executive level, or perhaps even as a business owner. Eric's Club mission is to promote the Hilton College of Global Hospitality Leadership. It doesn't quite roll off my tongue as easily as HRM after so many years of knowing it that way, and to connect, motivate, and contribute to the success of our students. Eric's Club members work to inspire the future leaders of the hospitality industry. I'd like to ask the members of Eric's Club just to stand for a moment so everybody sees them, if you would. Thank you all for coming. And certainly, as you see them around during the rest of the day, please don't hesitate to ask them questions and steal their business cards and ask them for jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Can't ask them for money. I do want to recognize one thing before we go any further. Recently, December 22nd, 2022, we lost a very dear friend and colleague, and that is Bob Plank. And Bob Plank was one of the first members of this college. He was in the first class, one of 7, I believe. Is that right? I think it's 7. We're in the first class. Bob was a leader and a visionary, and please excuse me for reading this, but I wanted to say this correctly. Bob was a leader and visionary who made significant contributions to the University of Houston, this college, and the food service and distribution industries. Bob graduated, as I said, as a member of the first class of the Hilton College in 1871. He remained a faithful and supportive alumnus of the University of Houston, often returning to campus to speak on the value of participation, perseverance, and mentorship with our students. Bob is only one of 8 alumni to receive both the Distinguished Service Honorary Award and the Distinguished Alumni Award. He was also recognized by this college alumni as an Alumni of the Year. He served on the Dean's Advisory Council for both the Hilton College and the Honors College. Over the years, Bob served as president of the Hilton College Alumni Association, a board member and vice president of UHAA, and a member of the UH Athletic Foundation Board. He was a life member of UHAA and was a true active supporter of anything athletic with this university. Anybody that knew Bob would tell you that he knew what was going on with the football team, what was going on with the basketball team, and probably had been to the most recent game. Let me add to this. To say Bob will be missed is a true understatement. We are thrilled. I don't know that she's here, but Bob's wife of 53 years, Sharon, is going to join us today. I haven't seen her yet. She will be with us. And we will be joined also by Scott Grieger, Bob's nephew, who is also an alum and member of Eric's Club. So they will be joining us along the way. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our leader, Dr. Dennis Reynolds, Dean and Baron Hilton Distinguished Chair and a member of Eric's Club.
How are we doing? Some smiles. You excited? Yes. Well, the speech is going to be really good today. And keep in mind that when Eric's Club picks the speaker, many of you might think, well, who picked the short straw? They go through a painful process to select the best speaker that we could have. And over the years, we've had some amazing stories. And it's great because these are the people that you will become. Not the old white guy necessarily, but close. But it's inspiring. And listen to the words, because these are life lessons that you don't get to hear very often. In fact, we have so many students in here. That's fantastic. So many faculty and staff. Thanks for being here. Got one wave. Okay. That's better. So anyway, it's going to be great. Ask questions at the end, and we'll have a mix and mingle at 11:30 right outside in the foyer, and hang out, talk to these people. To have this many Eric's Club people from all over the world come in is kind of inspiring. So with that, welcome to Eric's Club, and go Cougs!
It's now my pleasure to introduce Jeff Heaney. Jeff was our 39th Eric's Club lecture speaker in April of 22. Jeff is the president of Mikasa Hospitality and Lifetime Brands. Jeff's lecture was inspiring and a great reflection on his accomplishments. Jeff is a 1992 graduate of the college and a member of Eric's Club since 2018. And Jeff is here to introduce our guest speaker for the day. So, Mr. Heaney, please.
Yeah, we all So I have a very distinct honor to introduce Mike Kozelski. That was pretty good, didn't I? Entrepreneurs, to me, are some of the most fascinating people to listen to. They have tremendous lessons about both business and, quite honestly, about life. And whether you decide to go out and become an entrepreneur, or you go work in a career for another company, I think you're going to take away some lessons from Mike today that can be applied to your life as a whole. So I invite you to lean forward, really pay attention to the great stories that Mike's going to share with us. He has a fascinating business that spans multiple states, from Texas all the way to Oklahoma and Colorado and everything in between. And Mike's recently moved back in the last 5 years to Texas, but still managing this really large business, and has a great, wonderful family, four children, 6 grandchildren. I've heard he does some mean tailgating for school, right? And he's a great contributor of both his time and his resources to the school, so we thank him for that. But I think you're in for a real treat. I ask you to give Mike a warm welcome as he presents today.
Hi, everyone. I'll have you know that I woke up at 1 o'clock this morning with night terrors. In my dream, I was about to come on stage here, and I looked down and I had these woolly slippers on, and I forgot my agenda. So I just want you to know I'm off to a good start. I've got shoes, and I have my agenda, so we should be good. First, I want to thank Charles Dorn for being the president of Eric's Club. Charles is a tireless supporter of the Hilton College here at the University of Houston. And no matter what I seem to be involved in, Charles is like the shadow. He is there, and I don't know what we would do without Charles. So thank you so much. I also want to particularly thank the students for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. When I was 48 years or so ago, when I was sitting out there would have been a million different places I would have rather been than sitting here and listen to my nonsense. But thank you for being here. I've also had the opportunity recently to be guest lecturer of a few of the classes. Dr. Legendre last semester asked me to speak about infrastructure and about supply chain management. And then this year I was able to speak to Annie Ding's class and also Catherine Gannap's class about food sales and distribution, and more about that later. I'll just say that for maybe the last 15 years, I've been able to speak at Metro State in Denver and did a number of classes, usually on food identification. And then inevitably, at the end of the lecture, I would say, who wants to be in food sales and distribution? And not one hand would go up. So thank you to the faculty. I really do believe that it's a three pronged stool between the students, the faculty, and the alumni. And the more that we can work together, the stronger this college and university will be. So I really want to thank Dr. Bach and his whole team for really reaching out to me and making me feel welcome. Lastly, I would also like to thank Dean Reynolds. It was probably about 10 or 11 years ago, I made an appointment to come see Dean Reynolds, and he's probably wondering, who's he and why does he want to meet with me? And it was just to start this relationship. And you were so generous with your time then, and you've truly been a friend and made me feel comfortable the whole time I've been back. So thank you so much. Also, yes. And to the Eric Hilton Club members. You know, I lived on campus with Bob Cowan and Dave Smalley, who's not here today, but Dave did send me a very nice email last night, and I miss him. But to Nick Masad, thank you for being my friend. Steve Goodman. You know, one of the things that I'm trying to do is to work with our Eric's Club members, either as an investor or to invest my time, to create this synergy, because I really do believe Cougs should support Cougs. You know, I've often thought that if we were Cornell graduates, our cousins would know each other. So it's really important here that we reach out to one another and we start to build strength together, because we really have a great story to tell. And lastly, to Richard Weil. It was about 12 years ago that I was working at a Shamrock Foods food distribution food show. I was managing about 30 different vendors, and I was probably hiding behind a table of moldy cheese. And Richard came up to me and said, Mike, have you ever thought about reaching back out to the university and to Hilton College? You know, we have really something good going on there, and I think you would really enjoy to be part of. So I thank Richard for reaching out. For those of you who, blame Richard for me being up here, you know. So, but thank you, Richard. And by the way, Richard's son, Chris, is one of my clients in the food brokerage company, and we've represented Food Match now for almost 20 years. And, you know, I'm in sales and marketing, and I'm kind of like Joe Torre when he was the manager of the Yankees. You could win 105 games and still get fired. And so even though when I was working for other companies, I never managed to be terminated, but in this line of work, it seems to be a monthly occurrence. I wanted to speak a little bit about my upbringing, and the reason for it is I will read a text that Dave Smalley sent me after the UHAA Alumni Awards last year. I went to the Alumni Awards to really support Steve Goodman, who was getting an honor, and also Dave Smalley, who I lived on campus with. And Dave was an All-American swimmer, and he runs a great company. And I congratulated Dave on his award, and Dave sent me a text back that said, Mike, so proud to call you my friend. Confidentially, I am certain that without the chip in our shoulder, without something to prove, neither of us would have gotten to where we are today, nor go where we're going tomorrow. I firmly believe that success is but a journey, not somewhere that one can arrive at. Let's both keep moving forward, be the torch carrier for those who have not, to find their confidence and their journey. With humble respect, Dave. And I think one of the reasons why Dave sent that to me is we both grew up in humble beginnings. I was born in Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, most of you, if you've ever played Monopoly, you've seen the Reading Railroad on the Monopoly board. Very few people know that in the 1880s, that was the Reading Railroad was actually the largest corporation in the world at that point. For more relevant reference about Reading, Pennsylvania, it is the birthplace of Taylor Swift. So if we have any Swifties out there, you note that she was born and raised in Reading, Pennsylvania before she moved to Nashville. My father met my mother while he was in the Navy in Memphis, Tennessee. So my mom was raised in the South, And my father, his mother actually emigrated from Poland in the early 1920s. My grandmother was a seamstress. My grandfather worked in a foundry. He had a 6th grade education. He retired as a janitor. So I was the first one in my family to be able to go to college. And when I was just a few years old, my sister was born, and she was born with severe handicap. And she was really never able to take care of herself, so therefore my mother was a stay-at-home mom. So my dad was a milkman at that point in time. He delivered milk store-door and to people's homes. And by about the age of 7 or 8, I used to go with him to deliver milk. And he would get up at 2:30 in the morning, and off we went for the day. And because we had such little money, my mom was able to get me a paper route at age 10. And I had my first paper route of 60 deliveries every day, 6 days a week. And by the time I was 12, I got a route that had 130 papers, homes that I delivered to. And this is now 1968, 1969. I'm making $75 a week. You know, I'm hightailing it. That was good money back in those days. But it was really important that I contribute to the family because we just didn't have a whole lot. So rather than playing sports in high school and do some of the things maybe I would have liked to have done, I worked my entire time during high school. I went to work for Redner's IGA, anybody from Pennsylvania. When I worked for them, they had 3 or 4 stores. Now I think they have like 30 stores. And then I went to work for Pantry Pride. I was a union cashier in 1973, making $8.50 an hour, which was big money. You figure I was making $350 a week. My dad was a policeman at that point, making $100 a week. So I was driving an MG midget. I'm living large. And but I learned how to work. And honestly, school was not at the forefront of what I was doing every day. Really, you know, making money, taking care of the family, that was what was important. But thankfully, I went to a very, very good school district. And I got a great education, even though I'm not sure I was present that often. So when it was time to pick a college, I chose a number of schools. I applied to Ithaca University in upstate New York. I applied to Penn State. I spent a weekend there. I spent a week at St. John's in Annapolis. And if anybody's ever been to Annapolis, you have the Naval Academy on one side of the street, and then you have all the zoo animals at St. John's on the other side of the street. But it would have been a great education, but I just didn't think I could afford it. So I also applied to the University of Houston. And if I look back on it, I knew very, very little about the University of Houston. I knew that they played this basketball game in 1969 between Elvin Hayes led U of H Cougars versus UCLA. That is about what I knew about U of H. But a friend of mine who I used to play some baseball with, he was about 5 years older than I, and he went to St. Edward's in Austin. And he was talking about all the upside about Texas. And then a very dear friend of mine, 2 years older than I, played soccer at North Texas State. And they convinced me to take a flyer and come to Texas. So I decided to come to the University of Houston. And as a sidebar, a few years ago at Gourmet Night, I had the privilege of sitting at the Dean's table with Chancellor Renew Couture, and she looked at me and said, "Well, Mike, why did you come to U of H?" And I looked at her and I said, "You accepted me." So here I am. And it was really the best decision. You see, I came here as an English major. And by the way, I lived at Oberholzer Hall here in the Quad. And there was a fella there who was our RA. His name was Lou Lanzino. And I think Lou was doing a social experiment at the time. And what he would do is he would pair up Texans from rural Texas with people from the East Coast, just to see how we were going to cohabitate. And it was a wonderful experience, except after the first year, we were so rowdy that they actually disbanded all of us from OB Hall and pretty much separated us and put us all over campus. So my sophomore year, I actually lived on 101 Cobb Hall. So I lived the first 2 years on campus. And I would say it was the fall semester sophomore year. A friend of mine, Keith Hibner, who I was living in OB, we took a drive up to Denton. This trip had something to do with a couple of cases of Coors beer, and then we were driving back, and he convinced me that I should change my major to hotel restaurant management. So I decided to take a few classes, and I really enjoyed it. I had Don Smith taught HRM 137. It was kind of like an introduction to hospitality. And then I had Don Greenaway, who he taught class 138. It was tourism, and he was fabulous. And after those two classes, I was hooked. So about November of that semester, I decided I needed a competitive in-state tuition, and I needed a scholarship. Now, what I need to tell you is my first semester, I had a 2.0. My second semester, I had a 2.6. So I decided to go into Dean James Taylor's office to ask for a scholarship. So he looks at my transcript and he goes, well, Mike, all you need is a 3.8 this semester, and you'll get your GPA up to a 3.0. He goes, there's only 3 weeks left in the semester, but if you can do that, I'll give you the scholarship. So I think that goes back to what Dave was saying, something to prove. And for the first time, I was intrigued that maybe I should spend a little bit of time studying. But I also will tell you, I was coming back from the library one night with two fellas, Todd Hogan and Joe Pfeiffer. Now, both these guys were still trying to get their undergraduate degree, and I think they were in their mid-20s by this point. And they looked at me and they said, Mike, don't be like us. Why don't you go to class every day, try to learn what they're trying to teach you, and instead of going out and partying, maybe you might want to go study first, and then there's plenty of time for parties later. And so between those two and Dean James Taylor, they gave me the impetus to get serious about my studies. And I will tell you, from then on, well, first off, I think I was the busboy, the dishwasher, the waiter at Eric's Club. And then a year later, Dr. Rapole saved me, and he brought me in as a teaching assistant. And that I'm so grateful for, because you see, they say that oftentimes others will see something in you before you see it in yourself. And Dr. Rapole, I thank you, because I really do believe you saw a glimmer of sunshine somewhere here, and that you saw what could be, rather than maybe this rough piece of material you were working with at that point in time. So Dr. Rapole reached out, and he made me feel comfortable in academia. And so throughout then, I ended up making straight A's in all my HRM classes at that time. Except my senior year, Dr. Romanelli, who was a professor here, and he taught purchasing. And that was my favorite class. I'm pretty sure that I had to memorize the whole Wenzel's menu maker, and I had to know the specifications of every fruit, vegetable, the meat purveyor's guide, but that's what really intrigued me. Because I'm here to tell you, the reason why I'm standing here is I love food. And my whole life is about food. So Dr. Romanelli taught that class. He also saw something in me. And Dr. Romanelli left the Hilton College, and he became the general manager of the Anderson Mayfair Hotel. And he hired me. He hired a fellow named Doug Thomas to be the general manager. And he hired me to be the food and beverage director. Now, I should tell you that the Anderson Mayfair was a public institution, and all of our waiters at the hotel were old railroad waiters, and none of them could read or write. So that was my first foray into the workplace, and it wasn't that easy. Now, the other issue is being food and beverage director, I was working 65, 70, 75 hours a week, and I was taking 15 hours of classes. So my last semester, I'm sad to say, I made a C in marketing. Of course, that's my career, right? Sales and marketing. I make a C. And I made a B in Dr. Rapol's class that semester because I turned the paper in one day late. So, and I'm just telling you, what he taught me then, there's no favorites in this world. That you got to do the work, and if the deadline is Tuesday the 7th, you can't turn the material in on Wednesday the 8th. So thank you for that life lesson, but obviously I have not forgotten. So, while I was here, the first thing I got a job, I think it was Dr. Rapol that got this for me. We had a fella that owned 3 McDonald's at the time. And my job was, is they gave me a 2-page audit form. And I got $10 I had to visit all 3 restaurants that he owned each week. I got $10 a visit, plus my meal was paid for. So for a 19-year-old, I mean, I know today maybe McDonald's isn't whatever you think, but at 19 years old, having 3 meals and $10 a visit, I was all for that. So I did that for about a year. And then there was a job opening at a place called Tanny's Restaurant that was on Calhoun Street. And I decided I need to get more experience in this field, so I applied to be the assistant manager. Now, this was before me becoming the food and beverage director of the Anderson Mayfair Hotel. So I decide I'm going to be the night manager at Tanny's Restaurant. Of course, the first night I show up, I show up. The disc jockey doesn't show up. The bartender doesn't show up. There is mass chaos, and I just loved it. You know, I just loved the energy. You know, we were in theater for the first time. You know, Bono from U2 once said that sometimes you're the star, sometimes you're the clown, but you're still in theater. And that's what I felt working at the restaurant there. And my favorite was Wednesday nights. It was 3 for 1 night across from the university. And I was learning to bartend on the fly. So what I learned is you just made this drink strong. Nobody complained. So I'm still not sure I know how to make an old fashioned, but I put plenty of scotch in it. So, or bourbon or whatever the hell they do. So you truly did not know what you were getting. So I'm at the Anderson Mayfair Hotel. I managed to finally graduate. But while I was here, and I have to tell you why this college means so much to me. When I was here, I joined the Club Managers Association. And Red Steger at the time chose me as his student that he should be mentoring. Now, Red was not his name, but every time he got mad, he turned red. And I saw a lot of Red Steger. I went to work at River Oaks Country Club part-time while I was in college. I learned how to bartend better, wait tables, whatever it took, I was there. So eventually when I graduated, I was asked if I would entertain becoming the purchasing agent and storeroom manager at River Oaks Country Club. So I believe it was in 1981 I accepted that position, and I just loved it. I learned so much about food, and I kept many of the prospectus for the events that we were having. I recently was going through it, and when they were creating Frontier Airlines, we held the party at River Oaks Country Club to raise the money. When they were opening the Mansion of Turtle Creek Hotel in Dallas, we had the party at River Oaks Country Club, and I can still remember they wanted stone crab claws. They wanted this 25-pound brown lake trout that we poached and garnished. It was just a wonderful experience. And just to give you an idea, on Fridays, we would fly in Dover sole from France with fresh white asparagus with this tubular algae. And the waiters would take the cooked fish and fillet it at the table, serve it with the asparagus and the algae. And it was just a wonderful dish. we were charging $27.50 back in 1981 for that dish. And but what I learned about at River Oaks Country Club is how well you really could eat. And it was a fabulous experience. Other than maybe the time quail eggs was on the menu for 500 or quail legs, and I thought it was quail eggs. I think River Oaks Country Club still has quail eggs in the storeroom that I overbought. But one thing about that job, it was Monday through Sunday. You see, the country clubs are closed on Monday, but because I was in purchasing, I would work on Monday too to be able to meet with vendors and be able to order the product, because normally Tuesdays and Fridays are the big delivery days of the week. But I learned so much there. I mean, we had a produce cooler, we had a dairy cooler, a fish cooler. We cut all our own steaks from primals. We ground all our own beef. I just learned so much about the food business at River Oaks Country Club. And we're having an event tonight at River Oaks Country Club. And I mentioned to Charlene the last time we were there that this will be one of the first times I'll actually be able to walk through the front door and not buy the trash cans in the back to be able to get to the storeroom. So I'm really excited about going to River Oaks tonight, and I get to take my wife and 2 daughters as well. At River Oaks Country Club, I met a woman named Naomi Warren, and Mrs. Warren met her husband in Auschwitz, in a concentration camp in Poland. And of course, and Mrs. Warren was a Polish Jew. I was a Polish Catholic at the time. She hired me, and what a wonderful experience. What International Trading Company was, it was an importer of Danish ham. And just to give you an idea and put things in perspective, Mr. Warren came to Houston with a chemical engineering degree. And back in the late 50s, he still could not get a job in the good old boy oil and gas industry here. So he started importing sardines from Morocco. And eventually he started importing ham from Denmark. And I still remember the time we went to Furr's Cafeteria and Mrs. Warren said, "I'll take some of that round steak." And the attendant said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not round steak, that's ham steak." And Mrs. Warren said, "You call it what you want to call it, and I'll call it what I want to call it." And but she taught me so much about business. And when I started at International Trading Company in 1983, we were doing about $20 million a year in Danish ham sales, and we were doing a few $1,000,000 in distribution sales. Because what we were doing is we were importing ham from Denmark, and we eventually became the largest importer of refrigerated containers through the Port of Houston. And that business eventually grew to a $200 million business. And our distribution business grew to about $35 million a year in sales. So when I started with them in 1983, I was assistant purchasing agent. And then I became a purchasing agent. Then I became director of purchasing. Then I became director of marketing. Then it was director of sales and marketing. And then eventually it became co-general manager. So virtually I worked my way up from the purchasing desk to running the company. We eventually leased a facility right on the other side of the ship channel. We had a fairly large warehouse, and we sold our ham nationally, but we would sell a lot of our imported cheeses and other deli products to the grocery stores. And at one point, I was buying the majority of the domestic cheese for H-E-B. We were their warehouse at the time. And we were also the warehouse for Safeway here. And eventually the Safeway deli buyer asked the owner of the company if they could have Mike call on them, since I was doing all the purchasing for them. Now you need to know, and I know this may be hard to see, but I am an introvert. And I really find it terrifying to be up here. And in fact, I remembered I had to take a speech class as part of our degree plan. I waited to the very end, and I made sure to take it in the summer session, so it was the shortest period of time possible. And because I was terrified to be in front of people. I was much more comfortable working in my garden by myself than I would be in front of a group of people. And the next thing you know, I'm in sales and marketing as a career, but more about that. At International Trading Company, I was able to become involved with a lot of organizations. I was a member of the Fancy Food Association. They have 2 food shows a year, generally one in January in San Francisco and one in July in New York. I became a member of the International Dairy Deli Bakery Association. I was on the board of a company called Beignet. Beignet is now called Lactalis USA. They're the largest privately held cheese company in the world. And as a board member, they flew us to Istanbul, Athens, Rio de Janeiro, Bali, all over the world. And I got to visit all these places on the company's dime. So I never paid for a vacation for about 15 years. And I have to tell you, when I was sitting in these seats over here, what I really think I wanted to do in life is I wanted to eat good. I wanted to make decent money, but I really wanted to travel. And I wanted to travel for a number of different reasons. If you go into the archives, you'll see where Conrad Hilton said, peace through travel. And what Mr. Hilton, he started with the Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas. And and you have to understand the times he was in. He served in the Army, I believe, in World War I. His sons served in the military in World War II. But he started then eventually building international hotels. And the one thing that Mr. Hilton taught me is that once you travel and you see that people live differently and that your culture may not be their culture, it taught me that my little small world was just that, a little small world. And that by traveling throughout and seeing how other people live really expanded my view on the world. And so much so that I'll go back to, I was a sophomore in high school, and our German class took us to Germany for a week. Now, I had to sell, I think, Christmas cards and whatever to raise the money to go on that trip. But on Easter Sunday, 1972, I was in West Berlin when they allowed the people from West Berlin to go to East Berlin for the first time in 11 years, that when they had been separated when they put up the Berlin Wall. So as a sophomore in high school, and you have to understand that I grew up in the 60s, early 70s. I have an employee that once called me a walking contradiction. So I will just tell you that I grew up a 60s hippie. And here I am in the business world. And of course, back then, there was a lot of down with America. But I traveled to East Berlin and I traveled to Potsdam, East Germany. And on the way back, we had an incident where the Stasi actually told us that we had to leave all our coats and belongings in the bus, keep our cameras in the bus, and they invited us to coffee, tea, and ice cream, and they detained us for 3 hours while they went through all our belongings on the bus. So after that trip, I realized America was an okay place, and my view of the world changed. But you see, I had to go outside and visit other places to realize how good I actually had it. And growing up fairly poor with not a whole lot, I will tell you, this country, this college, and this university have really expanded my horizons. And I'm so grateful to have been to be a citizen of this country, to be a graduate of this program and this college. I will say one other thing, that it was about not too long after Richard said, Mike, why don't you get more involved in the Hilton program, that all of a sudden U of H football games were on TV all the time where I lived in Colorado. And the basketball teams were on. And you guys did this advertisement, University of Houston, the powerhouse. And I'm sitting there scratching my head. You see, when Dave Smalley went up and spoke at the last UHAA, he talked about when we were here, the axiom for U of H was Cougar High. And all of our brethren at A&M and UT, they would never let us forget it. And that's also part of what Dave is addressing here about having a chip on our shoulder. And when I was going to school here, I didn't have time. I think I went to 2 football games. I never went to a basketball game. At some point, I was either studying or I was working. But in December of 2020, I moved back here to Houston. My 2 children and my 4 grandchildren live here. And I wanted to be involved with the Hilton College. And I also started attending the football games. In fact, again, Dr. Couture, what brought you back? And I said, I'm shallow. It was your sports teams that brought me back. Tom Herman was having a great time and really managing a lot of success here. And then recently, our basketball success is just unbelievable. And I will tell you, Mike, that I was one of the people who did not miss a home game this year. So, and we also got to travel to the team to the Oregon game, which was just so exciting. So I am bullish on all things University of Houston because it is the powerhouse. The other thing that brought me back here, not only my family, the Hilton College, but also the diversity of the food scene here in Houston. You see, in Colorado, and we'll talk about my business in a minute, but Colorado's food scene is really European-centric, which really was perfect for me. I mean, I have made a living selling specialty cheeses, charcuterie. Now here, who can go into a restaurant now and not see a charcuterie board? So that was a big part of our business. And in fact, about 7 or 8 years ago, we represent probably 5 different Italian companies that made Italian meat products because I know no conflict. But a little bit about our business. United Sales and Services is a sales and marketing company. We are food brokers. And not a lot of people know what a food broker is. And in fact, I've now spent 3 guest lectures trying to explain what a food broker is. And I'm still not sure a lot of people know what it is. We are the local sales entity that represents food manufacturers to the local community. So for instance, I represent Belgioso cheese. If anybody goes into a deli anywhere, you're going to see Belgioso cheese in the deli because they are the largest manufacturer of fresh mozzarella. And Erico Arricchio, who's a friend of mine, he came to the U.S. in 1979, and I've been selling his products ever since he first came here. So we are Belgioso's representative at retail. So basically, it is my job to grow Belgioso's sales in the local grocery stores every year because they expect this year an 8% increase, and I need to get that increase for them come hell or high water. But we manage their marketing budget. So my people make the headquarters sales to the deli buyers at the grocery stores. I have people that are in the stores to make sure our products get out of the back cooler onto the shelves. It doesn't seem very hard, but sometimes it is. And so we manage basically the budget and the sales of, right now we represent 130 manufacturers. In our heyday, we represented about 300 manufacturers. See, we started United Sales and Services in 2002. For 3 years prior to that, I worked for another food broker in Colorado, built up a portfolio, was making a good living. We then tried to buy that food brokerage company from the individual who owned it. At the last second, he decided to sell it to his daughter, and he asked us to sign a non-compete, which we did not. So out of the blue, one day we were working for Market West, the next day we were working for this new company called United Sales and Services. And I started this company out of my secretary's living room. calling up vendors and soliciting vendors to represent them. And then later that week, there was a fancy food show in San Francisco. We went out, we started soliciting vendors and clients to represent. And in that very first year, we did $872,000 in commissions. I own and operate a company that is commission oriented only. We get paid by commissions on sales. So in our heyday, we were able to build up United Sales and Services to a company that sold about $300 million of foodstuffs a year, in which my commissions or operating income was $6 million. At that point in time, we had about 60 sales associates, all making a good living. To this day, we still pay health insurance for all of our employees. Remember earlier I talked about being a walking contradiction. In a lot of ways, I am a socialist with capitalistic tendencies. And so it was really important that we support our employees. And we treat the employee like my dad wanted to be treated 50 years ago when he went to work for a company. He thought he was going to be at that company the rest of his life. Obviously, that's not the case today. So go back to United Sales and Services. We ended up becoming the largest retail deli broker in the state of Colorado. Or as one of my friends calls it, we were the tallest midget. And so we were out there competing against large corporations, and we were privately held. We started this company with 4 of us with a total of $200,000. I had, in 2001, 2002, I was asked to be a consultant for a company called Boulder Fruit Express. They were an organic produce distributor in Boulder, Colorado. They weren't making a lot of money, so they asked me to try to turn the business around and then try to sell it. And at that time, I was still working for Market West. But on a part-time basis, we were able to make them profitable within a year, and then we ended up selling the produce company to United Natural Foods for 13 times EBITDA. So then the good news about that is for about a year and a half, they paid me $5,000 a month consulting fee, and they gave me 5% of the sale of the business, which I turned around and used it as my seed money for United Sales and Services. My portion of that $200,000 was $72,000. So on January 10th, 2002, we start the company with $200,000. We knew we had to compete against large national companies, so we hired a full staff. And I'm happy to say by the end of August of 2002, we had $272 left in the bank account. And things started to hum, and things started to come along. And next thing you know, our retail deli business is rocking. We're becoming a real player in the industry. And you see, I had worked with all these clients at International Trading Company as a buyer and as a salesman. So I developed relationships with these vendor clients. The first thing I'm here to tell you is people do business with people they like. So it's really important that you practice some hospitality in your business, because you see, for the longest time at International Trading Company, I was managing the company, and I was not the most easiest guy to get along with. And I saw some people actually passing me by because they were a little more carefree and they were friendlier to deal with. And my whole attitude was, by God, I'm going to turn this company around. And if that means that I have to be difficult, so be it. But in some ways, it held me back. So what I'm here to say is it's important to be affable. I recently was watching a special on dogs, of all things, and they said the dogs that have survived happen to be the friendly dogs. So I'm here to say, let's be friendly people. I really think that we'll be able to benefit by it. There's really not much to be said about being the curmudgeon in the room. But to go back to US&S, we're competing against these large companies, and I didn't know what our point of difference was going to be, so I decided that since we're a specialty food broker, we would take these lines that we represented retail, and we would then become their food service broker. So Food Match was an example of that. We represented them at Whole Foods. We represented them for a number of other retailers, but then we became their food service broker. And Richard would know, because he's in this industry in Colorado, we were up against some food brokers that had been around a long time. Excuse me, and they were very, very good. So I remember going into Cisco, Denver, and I convinced the EVP that he should buy 5 of my cheeses from one vendor. So the first year we're in the business of food service sales, I have one table at the Cisco Denver Food Show in the last aisle, back by the trash cans, and I have cheese. And within 3 years, we represented 1,100 items at Cisco Denver, and we represented 30 some odd booths at their food show. Plus, we did the cheese carving for the show. So I know what's possible. And all it took was putting myself out there. You see, you won't get unless you ask. And what I had to do is I had to say, listen, we represent specialty foods. We do a great job at retail. And all those food service brokers would say, yeah, but they're retail brokers. They're retail brokers. But we changed that, and we became the very, very best we could be. So much so that we did an event, oh gosh, it's probably 10, 11 years now, where the International Dairy Deli Association had their annual food show in Denver. So we decided we were going to do an event at the Denver Clock Tower for 250 people, and it was called A Night in Spain. And we did everything from a chilled garlic almond soup to gazpacho. We sliced serrano ham, Iberico de pelota ham. We had it all. Now, what I haven't told you is the Denver Clock Tower does not have refrigeration, nor does it have any cooking elements. So we had to do a party for 250 without refrigeration or without a kitchen. And we pulled that off. And all I remember is the event was over, I'm leaving the clock tower, and my guys, not knowing where to throw the water that was left over from the beer, they threw it off the top of the 18th floor of the clock tower, and guess who was on the bottom of the 18th floor of the clock tower? I felt like, you know, some coach that just won a championship. So the one thing about being a food broker, every day is different. You see, when I was a little kid, I remember my mom and dad, you know, I was a handful, and it was like, oh, what is this kid going to do with his life? And I had all this energy. And the thing about, and I was bored. You know, that's one thing. Mike, why'd you get in trouble this time? I was bored. So the one thing about this industry, there's no boredom. I mean, there's a lot to do. And I've got to tell you a little bit because, you know, the first noble truth is that life is difficult. And it can be. So I'm not here to say today that everything is going to be roses for the students that sit here. Life is going to be difficult. You're going to have your challenges. And I will tell you, if there was one word to summarize my career, it's perseverance. I want to quit my own company 3 or 4 times a year. They just won't let me. So the other thing, probably for 17 or 18 years, I would get to work between 5 and 5:30 in the morning every day. I wouldn't leave till after 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. And then I'd go out to dinner with clients a couple of times a week. I was all in, and it took everything I had to be able to compete against these companies. You know, I oftentimes short sell myself. You know, I just say, well, we're just a bunch of guerrilla salespeople out there trying to make things happen. But Richard, you actually reminded me at the last Eric's Club meeting some of the things that we really have been able to accomplish. So I appreciate you reminding me. At the end of 2019, we had built this company to about $6 million a year in commissions. And you got to understand that my average commission percentage is about 2%. So you got to sell a lot of groceries to make, $150,000 a month payroll at 2%. And again, we had 60 employees. We had a great business. But at the in January of 2019, I made a decision that I wanted to move back to Houston to be closer to my kids and grandkids. And so we put in place, we need to sell our Colorado part of the business. We had an office building that we had already bought and we tricked out, and I still miss that office building. It's about 5,000 square feet in Arvada, Colorado. I now lease it to the company that bought our Colorado business. So think about this. At the end of 2019, I sold my food service and my retail perishable brokerage business to Horizon Sales of Costa Mesa, California. Not realizing that the third week of March, there was going to be a pandemic. And you see, as part of my buyout arrangement, I agreed that for a year, I would work for the company that purchased me. So in April of 2020, how many food service orders do you think we got from our distributors? 0. So we got no orders in April. We got a handful of orders in May. You see, in Texas, I'm not so sure we really have laws here, but they certainly weren't shutting down restaurants and things. In fact, they were encouraging alcohol drinks to go back then. And between Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, the restaurants could really survive here. And I also take my hat off to H-E-B, because what they did is they supported a lot of local restaurants and they sold their meals to go in a lot of their neighborhood grocery stores. So H-E-B really did reach out to the food service community to try to help. So I happened to sell at the right time. And then at the end of middle of December 2020, I decided to move back to Houston. At that point in time, we had been operating our office out of a building on 1230 Heights Boulevard. And in fact, we had a number of alumni gatherings at that building. And it, high ceilings. I think we had 110, 115 people at one of those events. And in fact, we did an event at that house for an International Dairy Deli show here in Houston, where we had 230 people, which is now my house. And we did a great event because you see, my life again is all about food. And what I'm not adequately portraying today is my love of food. So in summary, I'm now operating a company. We're managing sales of about $100 million a year. We have 25 employees. And once again, I'm a little bored. I'm not all that happy with where our company is at the moment. And I have no idea what I'm about to do. But many years ago, a lady came up to me and said, Mike, what I really appreciate about your brokerage company is you're constantly able to reinvent yourself. My problem is I haven't figured out the latest reinvention. But you see, if you would ask me, has the pandemic affected you? I would tell you, no, not a bit, but it has. For 2 or 3 years, I was working maybe 35 to 40 hours a week versus 70 to 75 hours a week. And now that I moved back, I'm kind of the CFO of the company rather than the guy who's really driving things. So any of you younger folks that are looking to own and operate a food brokerage company, please come and see me afterwards. Lastly, I just want to take a moment. When I was asked to do this, I went and got a new copy of Be My Guest by the autobiography from Conrad Hilton. And I forgot about how instrumental he is to all of our success and how proud he must be of where this college is today. But in the last chapter of this book, there's a chapter called Art of Living. And I'm just going to run over this briefly and we'll be on our way. What he says is, find your own particular talent You see, what was it Confucius said? If you enjoy what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. Well, find what you really enjoy. And even if it doesn't pay a lot of money, I guarantee you, if you put the proper enthusiasm in it, you will be successful and you'll be happy. It also says, be big, think big, act big, dream big. The good news for you on this side of the room is today you can dream big. And what I would say is plan the plan, execute the plan, and leave the results to God. And trust me, point 3 is the hard part. Number 3, be honest. To thine own self be true. 4, live with enthusiasm. I guarantee you, those of you who are most enthusiastic will go very far despite your shortcomings. I think one of the first things that got me really hooked is I was a waiter at one point at Knickerbocker's out on Westheimer Road. And after a UT Rice game one day, it was an afternoon game, and at 3 o'clock, I'm the only waiter in the restaurant. We have 200 seats, and next thing you know, I got 200 guests at our restaurant. And you know, if nothing else, I was enthusiastic, and I had a lot of support. And what came of that? Whenever we had a big party after that, they asked me to be the waiter. So I'd be able to slip in on a Sunday, do a party for 30, 40, make a couple of $100, and I was out of there in a few hours. It also says here, don't let your possessions possess you. And here's the hard part, because recently I've been really struggling with this. Don't worry about your problems. The successful life is a balanced life and includes thought, action, rest, and recreation. See, I can sit here and tell you how it is to work hard. What I don't know a whole lot about is how to find balance. And whether we know it or not, that is really what we're looking to find in our daily lives. How do we find balance in our life? Don't cling to the past. Look up to people where you can and down to no one. I guarantee you, when I go into a restaurant to sell, the first people I meet are the dishwashers, the bus boys, because you know what? In another 10 years, they're going to be the ones making the buying decisions. So maybe it would be easy for me to talk to the executive management committee. It's really easier for me to talk to the back of the house folks because from whence I came. But I think it's important that we treat everybody with equanimity. It also says here to assume your share of responsibility for the world in which you live. And lastly, it says, pray consistently and confidently. You see, there's a passage in a book that says, open-mindedness, willingness, and honesty. But these are indispensable ingredients to obtaining an overwhelming God consciousness. You see, for the longest time, I thought I was a material person living in a spiritual world. And what I found is that we are spiritual entities living in a material world. And sometimes it's really hard to balance the two. When I was a young boy, I remember on a Christmas Eve, we're having a family gathering, and all I wanted to do was go out and hang out with my teenage friends on Christmas Eve. And I remember my grandfather saying, Mike, this is family. Family should be important to you. So at age 13 or 14, I really didn't understand that, but today I do. You know, Warren Buffett's description of success is the ones that you want to love you, if they do, you are a success. And today, who I want to be loved by, I want my respect of my children, and I want to be loved by my grandchildren. And nothing pleases me more than to get down on my all fours and play with my 2 to 9-year-old grandchildren. They are the future, just as though you are the future. Many years ago, my mom would say, Mike, you can be and do anything you want in life. And I would think, man, maybe for someone else that's true, but not me. But I will tell you, because of people like Dr. Rapol and some of my fellow students here today, this college that gave me confidence when I had no confidence, and this university, it propped me up when I didn't have the legs to stand. So anything that I can do today to give back, I'd be more than happy to do so. I only hope that you don't spend as much time away from the university as I did, because I was gone for about 35 years. And I came back only 11 or 12 years ago because of Richard. But I'm here today. You have 100% of my attention. And if there's anything you ever need, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much.
We have a couple of minutes, and don't go anywhere. We'd like to, if anyone has any questions for Mike before we move to the next part of our agenda, please. We have microphones, and Mike will be glad to answer any questions, anything. And I can't imagine we have this many people that are quiet. No questions for Mike at all? How do you become a food broker? Oh, thought I saw a hand. Oh, there we go. Chairman.
So, Mike.
Yes.
I loved what you said, and I loved your enthusiasm and everything. I really didn't know all that about you. And I just wanted to know, when can I get you in New York to help me straighten my world out?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I would love to come, obviously. And Jeremy, if you don't know, runs a very, very successful operation. So thank you for your kind words.
Oh, it was true. It was great.
And
And I'm
but-
serious about that.
Oh, no, and I'm serious about coming. By the way, I just realized I didn't turn my microphone on. Is that okay?
Other questions?
Okay, so we hear you even talked about how I'll wait for the mic to come over so they can catch it on the recording. No, you're okay. I don't really need this, but it's just for the recording. So hi, future whoever listens to this. Anyway, so you already brought up how that you tend to people like your companies because you reinvent them so often, right? Has there been a failed attempt at it at one point, and then at what point did you realize it was failed?
I once had hair, and either I've been scalped or they've just beaten the hair off of me. See, we're a sales and marketing company. So, and a particular one that a lot of startups reaches out to, and specifically in the natural food arena. Anybody that has $10 and a good idea develops a brand, and then I'm responsible for the success of it. So I will just tell you that failure is a part of everyday living, and that we've had great success, and the success is representing companies for 20 plus years, because that's really an anomaly. You know, a lot of food manufacturers change brokers like they change underwear, and that means often, and
In case there was any doubt.
so I will just say that, you know, the hard part is, for the longest time, our company, we were the hunters. And I can tell you that I'm much more comfortable being the hunter than the hunted. And then once we moved back here, our company was only 60% of the size it once was. And if you were here last year for the lecture, the lady that was doing the lecture said, there is no joy in playing small. And that's where I'm at right now. We're maybe half the size we once were. We're coming out of the pandemic. And I could spend hours just talking about current food costs and where food prices have elevated. And the reason we have 5.5% inflation is a lot of it's on food, because grocery stores don't lower food prices, and restaurants have been slowly raising prices. Now they're spending a lot of time trying to buy better. So I don't know if I answered your question, but you have to take the success that you have in life, but you also have to accept there's going to be failure, and there is success in failing. Any other easy questions, like my favorite cheese?
Okay, what's your favorite cheese?
Right now, it's Delice de Bourguignon. You can find it at Central Markets. It's a 70%, pays 3%. And it's a 70% butter fat, triple creme cheese. It's absolutely to die
Good for your heart.
for. Absolutely. And by the way, I have no cholesterol problems.
We have time for one more question. Right there.
Did you find it difficult transitioning to sales and marketing?
Yeah, considering it's something I would never do. Yeah. See, I remember when I was young, I spent a hiccup representing a meat company here in town called Cobble Sales and Marketing. And I did it for about a week, and I thought, man, there's no way I'm going to do this for a living. Well, see, what happened is that I became accustomed to managing this food distribution company, where I managed all facets of the business. I didn't have to do the sales, but I managed the sales department. And when I was in my early 20s, I had a friend of mine who was quite a bit older than I, and he was an electrician. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Mike, sales is the highest paid profession in America. So after I had been running these distribution companies, and I pretty much understood freight costs, how to get products from point A to point B, how to sell it. Once I became pretty much an expert on all things distribution, then it was comfortable for me to get into sales and make presentations. But I will tell you, every presentation I still go on, I have a written agenda. I will also say that my goal was, if I had a customer, let's call it Safeway Denver, my goal was to call on them once a month. I wanted a standard meeting time. If it was really good, I would be able to meet with them twice a month, because whether you know it or not, if I make a presentation on a new item today to a grocery store, when they say yes to me in February, by the time they get the item set up in their system, it's September. By the time they buy it, I'm hoping it's by November, before the holiday season. It just takes a long time. So this would have been very, very difficult for me to do 40 years ago. But, you know, after you do it for 40 plus years, it becomes more comfortable. And that's why when I talk to young students and I ask who wants to be in sales distribution, and I don't see any hands going up, I understand why. Because it's hard to put yourself in front of a large group. And, but it's still the best paying profession. But the best part about it, all in all, I was able to work Monday through Friday. And I did work Sunday mornings sometimes because I thought I needed to work. But I don't work Friday evenings, and I don't work on Saturday. Those are my days. And so you can have that separation in sales and marketing. Whereas if you're in hotels and restaurants and operations, it's a 24/7, 365-day-a-week game.
Well, one of the traditions of Eric's Club for our lecturers, don't trip, I think that's yours actually. We present our lecturer with this very special chair, and it actually says University of Houston logo, of course. It says Distinguished Chair Lecturer, and then there's a placard on the back. And so, Mike, we would like to present you for your efforts today. And this is actually the sample chair. Mike just told me his chair actually arrived in his office. Okay, so we're gonna do one thing very quickly. We're gonna ask the members of Eric's Club to come up. We're gonna take some pictures with Mike, but we would like to invite you to join us right outside the hall here for a meet and greet with all the Eric's Club members. And please ask us questions, get our contact information, and we look forward to speaking with you about anything. But I mean, Mike spoke about our own specialties, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Charles. Sorry to interrupt. Just, there's a attendance thing if you need to submit before you leave for the meet and greet. It's going to be on the screen in just a second. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll ask the members of Eric's Club to come up, and we'll